Oh, now?
That would be good, yes.
All right, good evening, everybody. All right, this is my name is Stone Gassman, and here with me are Lauren Dixon and Jay the Stingray, and we're going to do an audio commentary for The Mask of Fu Manchu from 1932. Looking forward to this.
So I've seen this film, I don't know, maybe 4 or 5 times in my life. Never close together. It's been pretty spaced apart. And I have never really gone out of my way to see it. It's either been on television back in the day or when I picked up this collection from Warner Archives, which includes Dr. X, Return of Dr. X, Mark of the Vampire, Mask of Fu Manchu, Mad Love, and The Devil Doll. So I ran through them when I bought that, and that was my most recent watch, and that was probably, I don't know, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, something like that. So I'm familiar with the film. I'm well familiar with the film, but I wouldn't call it a favorite of the era. But can't go wrong with the 30s and horror for me. Jay, what's your history with this thing?
This will be a first-time watch for me. So
I'm so jealous.
That's perfect then. That's perfect. Well, the reason why I decided to choose this as a audio commentary is because I've been doing a lot of research on Myrna Loy in the past week. And this was one of about 11 films that I chose from her filmography to watch. And after I watched this one, I was like, you know what? I had to bring in the region-free guys on this one because this one it blew my mind with just how out there it was with its pre-code shenanigans. So, but at any rate, without further ado, are you guys ready? Or
yeah, absolutely.
Just tell me.
Or should we give the audience like a 30 seconds to cue their thing up?
Whatever you think they need.
Okay. Yep.
Jay just doesn't like the audience, so he just go. He's constantly talking smack about him, so that's not true. It's a little true. So call it out, guys. Call it out. We're pushing play.
All right. Are you ready to push play?
Yeah.
On 3. 1, 2, 3, and play. The MGM logo, the old MGM logo.
The second lion.
Oh.
This is the second lion. Yes.
Welcome to our factory. Welcome to our factory where all the actors worked as slaves. Boris Karloff. Wow.
So, interestingly, Karloff really wasn't the big star when this film was shot, and because when Frankenstein had been released the year before in 1931, his name had been withheld from the credits to create mystery around the character. If you look at the credits of that film, there's just a question mark when it says the monster. It was revealed in late 31 that he was in the role, and he did a press tour in 32. But this film was shot before that and released. When it was released, he really still wasn't the big star throughout the whole country that he'd just be in a couple of years. When, especially after Bride was released, which there was a re-release of the original Frankenstein. He was by 35 in just a couple of years, he was one of the biggest stars in the world. But this is just before that broke. I won't do that a lot, I promise.
Now this was released in October of 1932, which I believe was after The Mummy, correct?
Isn't it the same month as The Mummy?
I should have double-checked that. I could do that right now. But
he was on
aside
loan.
From Karloff, there's a number. Oh yeah.
It's important to note that he was a contract player for Universal. So to make this film, he had to be loaned out, which was not an easy process. But he did. There was an anticipation that he was going to be a big star and he was going to be powerful, and he wanted to keep him happy. I'm not sure why he wanted to do this in particular, but apparently he did.
Oh, Mummy came out in December. Because it's interestingly enough, aside from Karloff, there are a number of connections to the Mummy in this script. I mean, in terms of um, certain inspirations, like with Carnarvon and the King Tut discovery in 1921, they actually mention both of their names in the script here. But I have a feeling Karloff went back to Universal and shot Mummy right after this. So, yeah, so the plot is all the explorers are on the hunt for Genghis Khan's throne and tomb and scimitar and just all the, so that they can take his power again and invade Asia. Oh, man.
Another thing which is interesting about Karloff in this period is he was laying the groundwork for the modern Screen Actors Guild. He was one of the founding members, and he was unionizing the sets in large part because of the horrible conditions on the Universal lot. He had a permanent back injury from wearing weights on, and from the costume on Frankenstein. His back was never okay since, and he was very passionate about film, but he was very passionate about finding a safer way to make film. So coming over to MGM to make this, I'm sure he was using it as an opportunity to spread the word about what he was trying to build, and ultimately would be very successful. This sort of shot you don't get in cinema anymore, where there's just a bunch of men around a table. That kind of like today there'd be 7 intercuts and over the shoulder shots. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or a bad thing, to be honest with you. It's just a different style of a different time.
It'd be a multicam thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. They do 3 takes from 4 camera shot, and actually with digital cameras now, it might be a dozen cameras. It doesn't really matter. They just have to stay out of the shots. Now, this kind of expositionary scene is really common right through the 30s and 40s and even into the 50s. I just revisited Mole People, and that literally starts with a professor pointing to a globe and saying, "We don't really know what's in here." And he gives you maybe a 4-minute discussion of what might be inside the Earth, and goes through hollow Earth theories, incidentally. So this kind of like having characters serve as kind of just straight exposition, not uncommon.
And mummies. How coincidental. They just came alive just to take him down.
They're awfully spry.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, zombies can run.
There's a number of connections. Mm-hmm. Karen Worley from Scarface. Mm-hmm. One of my that's probably is my favorite pre-code movie is Scarface,
which also has Karloff in it in a bit role.
Exactly, as Gaffney. Yep. He got shot in a bowling alley, if I remember correctly. Yeah,
that sounds right. I haven't. I've listened. The Paul Muni film I like definitely. I won't pretend I watch it more than I do, which is once every 10 years or so.
Makes a perfect double feature with I'm a Fugitive from a Chain Gang. I believe captive of Fu Manchu somewhere near. Stop, advise, immediate but secret action.
So the idea of a foreign and especially a Far East supervillain was definitely a trope of this time, and definitely of the literature of this time. A lot of the pulp novels were using these kind of warlords of other countries invading America. And there's a good social reason for that. America in the 30s was coming out of the 1920s, which we had 2 things happening. The factories were getting built everywhere, and skyscrapers were being built everywhere. And it made for a lot of foreign investment in America. And that was really the first time in our history we had that kind of foreign investment. And a lot of people were very wary of the idea that someday they might be working for someone who wasn't an American, which hadn't really happened in our history before. And ironically, people were a little bit more comfortable about working for Germans or the British, who had both been obviously big opponents in wartime, not necessarily in people's lives, but in the case of the First World War, certainly. But China was a big fixation, and we've never actually been at war with China. Not a hot war, anyway.
Fingers crossed.
Nah, we're going back into Syria. We don't have time for China. I love that shot.
Yeah, that's insane right there. You will drink the black sperm of my vengeance.
So that's Karloff, right? Right there.
That is Karloff in the makeup,
Sure
yeah. His voice is obviously very distinctive English, but he's pretty unrecognizable.
His height is probably the most recognizable thing about him. They were trying very hard to hide the fact that he's so much taller than the rest of the cast, because he was a mountain of a man.
Man. He's wearing powers. Oh yeah.
He's wearing platform shoes, I believe, too. You just bring those over from Frankenstein?
So now, if you're noticing a lot of Mandarin imagery going on right here, yes, this is exactly the type of thing that Marvel was ripping off when they created the character for the Iron Man comics. This archetype is really common, and the idea of all these symbols and kind of a Asian occultism as kind of a mysterious science. This whole time period, and it's not this film in particular. Again, there was a lot of this in the culture and in entertainment at the time.
You just said, I believe I was on drugs for several days. Where are you now? My friends, out of curiosity, call me Doctor. I love that. I love that.
It's interesting what Hollywood thought a powerful Chinese man would wear, because this is like a full century out of realism. I mean, the Chinese definitely have traditional wardrobes, but they were a lot more modern than this.
So, are there any Asian people in this film?
Isn't there one henchman, I believe, if I remember correctly?
There might be one, yeah. But a lot of the guards are African American, and here's Myrna Loy, who of course, played so many exotic types in the 20s, 30s. In fact, this was the last one. She insisted, no, this is the last straw. I am not doing this anymore. So this was her last exotic Oriental / Mandarin, whatever exotic type they would do with her, because she didn't get serious roles until 32 when this came out. I mean, she had done "Love Me Tonight," the famous musical comedy, and she had done another movie with Leslie Howard. She was starting to do some serious stuff, and she wanted to get out of that exotic cesspool once and for all. She finally did. Now, okay, I got to say, when I first saw this with the eardrums, cliffhanger, I guess, or whatever you think, it makes me think of the cliffhangers from the Batman series. Like this is exactly the type of tone and just everything about it. It screams 1960s Batman. In fact, there's more scenes later in the death traps later in the movie that also harken back to death traps in the series.
And of course, to me, you're seeing the early stages of the kind of Dr. Phibes / Jigsaw thing going on here. This is the precedent that really set this in motion, as well as films like Dr. X. Actually, definitely that plays a role too. Oh
yeah, and how many gongs are in this movie? About 500 512 or something.
Well, we didn't know a lot about Asian culture, so what we did know, we leaned into.
We know they like rice and gongs.
Who doesn't like rice and gongs, though?
This was the
Okay, so ready?
This was the most okay. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say the one thing we should actually mention early in watching this is that our perceptions are so off modernly. I think maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you guys are pretty well set on this, but you know, Karloff was big in silent film. By the time he made Frankenstein, he had already made 60 full-length motion pictures.
Wow.
So did Myrna Loy also. Sorry. Yeah, go ahead. Keep going.
And then you have to think that his last film was in 1971, Alien Terror, which was a Mexican cheapie, which you do not try and watch, because at that point he was trying to just cover medical bills, which obviously didn't really end up helping him a whole lot. But so this is a man who had one of the longest careers in Hollywood to date. I mean, you have to go to a George Burns or someone like that to even compete. Long history, important behind the camera as far as in front of the camera. Not that he directed or wrote, but he, again, his being a founding member of the Screen Actors Guild, being one of the first representatives, being a liaison between the studios and the Actors Union, he built a lot of what we think of as modern Hollywood. So much more than just a guy in green makeup. It's actually kind of bluish gray makeup, but whatever.
So what do you think so far, Jay?
It's definitely interesting. We were talking before we went started recording here that this has a warning for yellow face, which I wasn't really aware that was a thing, but basically it's people dressed up like Asians, right? Or pretending to be Asians.
I think the key is pantomiming what a misrepresentation of the culture, you know, a broad misrepresentation. I'm of the mindset that actors act, and they're never playing themselves, or very rarely are they playing themselves. So to a degree, you're always going to be pretending to be someone you're not, and there's no shame in makeup per se. It's when it trespasses into some offensive cliche, or it reinforces a stereotype that is regrettable. So I don't think when Downey Jr. did blackface for Tropic Thunder, I don't think anyone would reasonably look at that film and say it's offensive. So it's not the makeup. It's the intent of the performance. The problem with this film is that it leans into every stereotype, every villainous stereotype you can imagine. And at the time, that was really prevalent.
Yeah, I was thinking it's good that a film like this is still, around in its original form, because I think we need to learn from that stuff rather than just, banish it.
And this is exactly why you've heard this a million times from me, Jay, so I really apologize to throw it at you again. But my big fear about us losing physical media, which is going to happen, isn't that I won't own a shiny disc. It's that movies like this might not have a clear-cut home in a world that only has streaming. And the idea that we're going to lose movies, and I don't think we're talking about real obscurities. Like Frankenstein will be okay, but will The Devil Doll be okay? I'm not convinced it will, because who's going to rent it enough times? What's the population that's going to rent it enough times to keep a streaming service saying, let's keep offering it? I'm at least with a physical media presence, if it sells enough to justify the pressing, those copies are out there forever, or until they degrade to the point they can't be played.
That's why archives are so important.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, the only reason we have Nosferatu is because a bunch of collectors refused to let go of their prints.
That's crazy.
That's not the only film that's the case of. It's just the most popular to talk about. And every lost film that we have lost, you hope is sitting in a collector's vault somewhere. But unfortunately, when you talk about films shot or released in nitrate prints, it's pretty unlikely at this point that anything that we haven't found will be found. So now we're searching for things from the 40s onward, because talk about safety film, and that's more likely.
I was talking to a friend of mine recently who
Speaking of lost.
A friend of mine actually works in an archive, and he was telling me that, when they banned nitrate film, it was really kind of a knee-jerk reaction, just because it wasn't quite as flammable as what they were saying. They kind of overreacted a little bit with all that. And who knows how many films we lost just in that,
If the projectors were being properly maintained, there really wouldn't have been nearly as much problems. But anytime you look at an old transfer, which is literally a camera shooting off of a screen, and you see all those hairs in the gates and all, you can tell that the equipment wasn't being maintained, even in very prestigious places. So there was definitely some cases of some horrific fires. I mean, but
it's not like you're all
devastating.
Sorry, go ahead, Stone.
The most devastating fire was in 1937, the Fox fire, which destroyed pretty much Tita Berra's entire filmography. And Tita Berra was, the very first vamp on screen. Myrna Loy became a vamp in the 20s as well. And also this was directed by Tita Berra's husband, Charles Braben, who had done Tita's last two movies. So he right at home with this movie. But unfortunately, all of Tita's movies are pretty much gone, except her breakout film, which was Fool There Was in 1915, which is now thankfully preserved by the Library of Congress. But she also starred in the biggest box office hit of 1917 called Cleopatra. That, to me, is the holy grail of lost movies. It's like this 3-hour epic.
So I have a serious question for both of you. I mean, there's no questioning that these are pretty unflattering ethnic stereotypes in this film. Are they worse than really what we saw in the Indiana Jones films, though?
No, I wouldn't.
I don't think so either.
No, not really.
I think, and I'm not calling for. Listen, the worst thing the people who are against censorship can ever do is point your fingers at something else. That's not what I'm doing. What I'm doing is saying that I don't know that we necessarily, until very recently, even cared about how we presented cultures. And I think people think these films is way they were barbaric back then. I'm like, I don't know. But I think 30 years ago, we were still definitely trespassing pretty hard.
Yeah. What about the kid in the Goonies?
Yeah. I mean, everybody gives, Temple of Doom, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom crap because of all the stereotypes. But Willard Huyck and Gloria Katz, who wrote the script, they were just drawing upon those 1930s serials, as dated as they were. And, sure, we may have evolved, as an industry, but they were just being faithful to those 30 serials. And Willie Scott, as much as she screams, that's a character that would have been in those serials. So, I mean, if you want to put a disclaimer on something like they do with the Popeye cartoons, these are things that we don't, we don't do now, and we've learned from it. I get it, but still make them available. I mean, Disney should release Song of the South. For God's sake.
Not what I was thinking about too.
It's especially since that film's reputation is the problem, not what's the actual content.
I never thought it was bad. I mean, of course,
it's not a bad movie.
It takes place post-slavery. Uncle Remus is a man who obviously came from a limited education, which would be accurate for the time period, unfortunately. But he's portrayed as being noble and caring, and good with children. I mean, I'm not really sure what the stereotype. I'm not saying it's not a stereotype. I'm just saying I don't know that it's a harmful stereotype.
Right. Well, it's like, Asian people are smart, it's not a negative stereotype,
Yeah, I mean, I've had conversations very recently with people about why I don't like the word representation when we talk about diversity. I do believe in diversity. I don't believe in representation because I think it leads to kind of a negative way to look at the world. It should be about the best work out there gets elevated, and surely because there's great people from every culture, great storytellers from every culture, you should be able to look at anywhere at any corner of the earth and find the best people, right?
Yeah.
So it shouldn't even be an issue as long as we're not actively dissuading people from being storytellers. I don't see the issue. The same thing with acting and everything else. But I will tell you that one of the things I get as a retort is, well, it's easy for you to say that. And I always immediately say, why is that? Because their next line is going to defeat their argument, no matter how you cut it. Because to assume that I am something is just as offensive as anything else. And horribly inaccurate. I am a big mutt, if anyone's wondering. I do not have a clean lineage back to one culture. So. So archaeologists in movies always look like this.
Yeah.
In real life, they look like auto mechanics,
Exactly.
They're just guys who go to work.
Yeah. See, I just don't understand. MGM was the most prestigious studio of the 1930s. They had the King, Clark Gable, and they're making this stuff. It's just amazing to me.
They're making this stuff because Universal was cutting in on their territory. You have to remember that theaters were new. Dedicated movie theaters were very new to the landscape. And when you're making the big song and dance spectacles, obviously you're going to get screens and you're going to stay on those screens for a long time. And then these two films come from Universal, Frankenstein and Dracula, reverse the order. And those movies stay on screens a lot longer. Well, they'd never put up with that kind of direct competition. So that's how you see these kind of films coming out from, MGM and from Fox and basically from everyone because they needed part of this action.
Sorry.
That's pretty hardcore for the time, by the way.
Oh.
Now, today he'd fall back on it and it'd come out his chest.
Oh, yeah.
Oh. Now, this was really, I got to confess, this was the very first thing I ever watched that is Fu Manchu related. I mean, do you guys know more about the character than I do?
Just that it was one of many big bads from Asia that was in the culture. I mean, it didn't translate. You're not getting modern Fu Manchu movies, so it was obviously of its time. But, I mean, the other thing to keep in mind is that this is not the only Asian that Karloff would play. So, I mean, it's kind of funny because it was so not considered a big deal at the time that, by the time, he does Dr. Wong Investigator, right? Mr. Wong Detective. That's it. Which actually was a small series of films in itself. I mean, it was just codified. It was okay at the time to do this. Big stars were willing to do it. Which today I don't think you'd have as many A-listers lining up to do a.
Matt Damon could play Fu Manchu.
Ben Affleck. Ben Affleck would be the guy I want to see.
Well, because Matt Damon did that Wall, the Great Wall movie a few years ago.
Oh, yeah. I never saw it, but I found it pretty funny when because apparently Matt Damon and Jimmy Kimmel have had like a long feud for years, all playing games. But like during the Oscar ceremony, he gave Matt Damon a bunch of shit about the Great Wall and how it lost so much money. Like, wow.
So one of the things I always love about this period of filmmaking is just, and yes, that was a hand that fell from the sky, is just that it always looks to me like they cared about every shot. Nothing is just throwaway. Now that's not true of everything. Like the films like Maniac from '33 is like all throwaway shots made in someone's garage. But for the studios really cared about every shot. You can see the labor on screen, even for something as simple as a guy just turning to face the camera. And today, they just kind of figure out what the most recent music video director came up with and kind of imitate that. It's more than a little like haphazard and throwaway today.
Almost like stuff a second unit would do.
Yeah, absolutely. Where do you think I can get a safari hat like that?
eBay?
Yeah.
I think the last Fu Manchu movie actually came out in 1981 when it was highlighted on a Turkey episode of Siskel and Ebert because they trashed that. Oh no! It wasn't I think it was a Fu Manchu movie, and then also a Charlie Chan movie had come out the same year, as well as Legend of the Lone Ranger. So they were trashing all three of those movies in the same episode. Well, now that I think about it, Disney should try Fu Manchu.
I will just take this opportunity to once again say fuck Roger Ebert, fuck Gene Siskel.
Okay. I could say fuck one, but not
I know we have warm fuzzies about these guys because they were like the television presence about movie culture, but they were so toxic to everything that I care about. I don't care.
I understand that. You're not wrong. You're not wrong, sir. You're not wrong.
I've told this story before, but they would have the little blurbs. They give it this thumbs up or whatever next to the show times. So I would look at what they hated, and that's what I went and saw, because I was so night and day different with those guys.
I always thought when the Boogeyman by Uli Lamel. Yeah, when Boogeyman came out, it got 2 thumbs down, and they put it on the poster.
That tells you something, doesn't it?
They knew what they were selling. They knew what they were selling. They're like, hey, you want respectable? Yeah, it's not the film for you. And that, by the way, a lot of people like that movie. I don't think it's that good. But a lot of people have good memories of it. I just don't.
I don't either. Might as well put a shock till you drop review on there.
Ooh, the Tracy Lords flick. That's awful. So this was obviously shot at the same time as the earliest scene. They just changed the lighting because it's the same extras in place. Now that's a hat I need too.
Yeah.
Oh, Myrna. She's like, what the hell am I doing in this?
Okay, so the sword's hilt is transparently a penis, right? That's what we're looking at.
Okay.
Possibly.
Wow. See, yeah.
Once you see it, you can't unsee it.
Thanks, Lauren.
No problem.
You like the claws? You like the claws that he has there?
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, I think there was a lot of attempt at drug imagery because that was the thing. Yeah, all the drugs come out of Asia.
That's what I was thinking. He has 2 coke nails.
Yeah.
I could be wrong, but I think they mentioned opium somewhere in the script. I could be wrong, though.
Well, that would make good sense.
Yeah.
By the way, I don't recommend you actually playing with a Jacob's ladder this way. It's not a good idea.
Oh, I thought you had your penis out. I'm sorry. Switch back over here. Jacob's ladder.
I got you.
Well, that didn't hit well, did it?
Its name is Billy, by the way. That's not true.
You know,
This scene goes on way too long.
Oh yeah, it does go on way too long. But I'll say, while Myrna Loy is still in this scene, that the movie that she actually made before this is actually considered, well, at least by Wikipedia, to be a prototype of an early slasher film. In '32, right before she made this, she made a movie at RKO called 13 Women, where she basically uses her mind powers to kill like a swami and kill all these women that were racist to her in college, all these sorority sisters, and she murders all of them one by one. It was produced by David O. Selznick, and at the end, in front of the star Irene Dunne, she actually gives this whole speech hating white sisters, which goes along with this.
So, I mean, do you want me to go get that movie? Because I can do that.
Well, you had that too?
I have almost everything that is still existent from 1930s horror.
Oh. So would you agree that's an early slasher prototype?
Not really. Night of Terror is like the early slasher prototype from the period. 13 Women is really sarcastic all the way through. That's probably what you probably, if you haven't seen the film, you wouldn't get from just a description of it, is that it's almost just a really dark comedy. But it's good. It's a good film.
Okay. Yeah, it is a very good film. Here's the infamous whipping scene. I'm going to quote Myrna Loy. Yeah, I'm going to quote Myrna Loy directly from her autobiography, Being and Becoming. That script was really the last straw. In one scene, she has this beautiful young man tied down and whips him while uttering gleefully suggestive sounds. Well, I've been reading Freud, and apparently the writers hadn't. She went up to the producer and said, I can't do this. I've done a lot of terrible things in films, but this girl is a sadistic nymphomaniac. And the producers asked her, what's that?
What they should have asked her is, what's wrong with that? Clearly, they are not going to the right nightclubs. I mean, couldn't you see this? Whoa. Ooh. $35.
35.
Oh, there you go.
35.
What are you doing to that man?
I like how they kind of flipped it. They had a couple of black fellas whipping a white guy.
Yeah.
It's nice to see.
Mm-hmm. That's what I'm saying. God, that guy knocked out. Oh, he was so lucky.
I miss smoking in movies.
Me too. I think it's an immediate R now, isn't it?
It's not immediate R, but they just won't do it. I mean, it only villainous characters smoke now. And again, I mean, in India, you get an on-screen warning. Tobacco.
If someone's smoking, it says on the screen like
lower left corner, a symbol comes up of smoking within the circle and the line through. And there's a warning before any film that has smoking, alcohol, or domestic violence. Because apparently domestic violence is a big social issue in India right now. Big, like way big.
Yeah.
Well, by the way, my doctor recommends Camel cigarettes.
I'd walk a mile for one, in fact.
One hump or two.
Gotta go with the one. No,
Wow.
it used to be my brand of choice. Love Camels.
Never smoked. I had a cigarette in my life, and it was not for me.
Mm.
But you know, I went through a period where I was a younger man where I was selling cigarettes in a store, and that also helped me never want to smoke because smokers would always assume you remembered what brand they smoked.
Oh, really?
Hey, I want a pack of what you know what I want. No,
GPCs. I was in here yesterday.
I really don't know what you want because I don't commit to this to memory. And heaven forbid, if you only had a soft pack of something, you might as well have just raped their dead dog.
Yeah.
He just said the Sing Song Shop, a house of 1,000 joys.
Did you ever smoke cigarettes, Stone?
Oh, not for years. Back in the military, I did, but not for years. No.
Yeah.
But the Goy Loy Sung Bazaar.
Not that long ago, I mean, everyone smoked. I mean, I know, like Lauren, you said you didn't ever smoke, but I'm sure you had many friends that did.
I'd say the majority of them did.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Every single one of them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's necessarily.
I think the last movie that.
I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing that the smoking is on the decline. I just don't like the idea of browbeating people for choices. I think that's the wrong way for a free society to work.
Well, it's a nasty, terrible habit. So yeah, it's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
And
absolutely,
you know, it's there's this big push against vape now, like, but vape is a million times better for you than smoking cigarettes.
Oh, 1 billion.
I mean, and what it's doing, it's making people go back to smoking cigarettes, because they're saying how bad vaping is. So it's really counterproductive there.
Okay, that bed does not look comfortable one iota.
It doesn't look structurally sound either.
I can sleep anywhere.
I can't say.
I could fall asleep right now.
I could sleep in this position totally. I just lay my head back. I like to. I do it all the time.
Now, I know you mentioned Boris Karloff's last movie. I know it wasn't the last movie he worked on, but I still consider his truly last movie to be the Peter Bogdanovich film Targets, which
love Targets.
Really is his last great. Yeah, it's his last great movie.
Yeah, Curse of the Crimson Altar is 2 years later. So.
Oh, okay.
I love Targets. I think Targets is a great film. I think Curse of the Crimson Altar or the Crimson Cult, depending what part of the world you're in, is great in its own right. And then he went off to Mexico to make those last 4 cheapies, and they suck, all of them.
I don't think you talked to Boris's daughter Sarah about this movie, but do you know how she feels about this?
She doesn't watch most of her dad's work. I guess the most frustrating thing about that, of talking about to her, was that she really couldn't talk about the filmography at all. She didn't like scary movies. She still considers all this to be scary movies. Her dad never discussed work at home. She could talk about the union stuff pretty eloquently. She could talk about the family life, which, look, that's great to me anyway, because I don't think not many people have gotten her perspective on any of that anyway. So far from a criticism, but yeah, I mean, it's hard for me when my favorite film is Bride of Frankenstein. The shirt I'm wearing is Bride of Frankenstein. That couldn't really have the conversation with the closest living relative of the key ingredient of that film. How to be talking to her, and not much she can say. She's seen the film a few times.
I can definitely understand not being able to watch things like The Black Cat, because I remember when she mentioned like that is one that she absolutely cannot watch at all,
That's a
which I
hardcore
can
movie.
completely understand. Yeah, but I mean, what about something like Scarface though, or
I
Abbott and
think
Costello Meet the Killer, Boris Karloff, which I actually have a soft spot for,
the big problem, and she didn't state this outright, so I'm putting words in her mouth, and I know that's never a good idea, but I think that movies were just not a big part of that family's life because he was involved in movies as business. So it's not like they watched the film as a regular thing. And you got to think the time period, radio was still the king of the roost. And yes, he did radio work too, but I don't think she really listened to her dad's radio work either. So listen, I still think back of having that conversation with Sarah and just being completely over the moon about it having happened. Maybe for a lot of people, they think it's not a big deal. For me, it's one of the most exciting things I've ever done. So
I believe you. I believe you. Incredible.
That's not a real live snake, is it? No, it was like on a string or something, on a wire.
Yeah, it looks like it.
I mean, it was like a dead snake with a wire on it.
Yeah, yeah, it was. Now, Myrna Loy, said in her autobiography that she was given a pet python, quote unquote. Of course, they drugged up the python to within an inch of its life. And of course, Myrna, being Myrna, her heart went out to the poor creature, and she sort of took care of it. And everybody on the MGM lot thought she was nuts.
To be fair, anyone in this film has to wear those boots is probably nuts. So can we talk about movie length for a little bit? Because we only have like 20 minutes left in this film.
Yeah.
It's only 68 minutes, yeah.
And that was really common, that the 70 minutes was like really pushing it. A lot of these
in early
were
30s, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of these were 3 reel films. So do you think that it was actually healthier for films to be a shorter running time? Yeah, and maybe that's too broad, but maybe for the horror genre, do you think it's healthier to be shorter? Or because I tend to.
I do. I mean, how many films can you think of that you've seen recently that could have, had a 20 minutes knocked off easily?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Like Relic. And,
I mean, I've been watching a lot of
Relic and The Dark and the Wicked were both like a tight 90 minutes.
Yeah. I think Empty Man is the exception to the rule because I think that film earns its 2 hours and 15 minutes, but I can't think of another time when it's worked in horror cinema, to be honest with you, going over the 2 hour mark. But I think there's something to be said about working with the economy of the scenes. And yeah, it does lead to shortcuts, but does anyone mind that? I mean, I wish that short form film was a lot more acceptable. Maybe with something like Shudder and the rise of streaming, maybe we won't be locked into that hour and a half at the minimum structure. That'd be nice.
I mean, it depends on what story you have to tell. If you got something that you can do it in 20 minutes, do it in 20 minutes, man. I love short films.
Yeah,
they don't get enough respect today, but
I've always been like bothered that as our attention span as a society decreases, we're not feeding that with the art, right? Like instead we bulk up, we got to add another act to this movie that doesn't need it.
Right.
For commercial reasons. But yet it should make sense to keep it short because no one wants bloat in anything anymore. That's why YouTube videos get watched. If you look at the views on some of the top YouTube videos of all time, they'll compete with any film ever made. There's something to be said about brevity mattering.
Well, I've been watching a lot of films from this period in the couple of weeks, mostly with Myrna. I mean, and they play well at their 60, 70 not nearly 80-minute run times. I mean, for the stories that they are telling. But it's interesting. One of the very last pre-code movies was an MGM film called Men in White, which she made with Clark Gable. And believe it or not, that was one of only 2 pre-code movies to have an abortion subplot, which of course was kind of neutered in the final. That they eliminated some keywords, but it was still obvious. Clark Gable had an affair with a nurse. She got pregnant, but his high society girlfriend Myrna Loy wants to marry him, so it like ends up being this big mess. But the sad thing is that Myrna Loy herself, who always loved children, she had a miscarriage, and unfortunately that led to an infection and made her sterile, and she was never able to have children. This happened about 1936. But but I'm telling you all right now, Myrna Loy, what a wonderful actress. I mean, up there with Boris, I think, on many levels. Just they made completely different types of movies. And God, is she gorgeous.
A woman of this time period can't go wrong.
Oh, of course. Of course. See, this is demented stuff, even for 32. I think this is just really demented. I mean, look at this. I mean, what?
This is like PETA headquarters here.
Yeah.
I think that's the snake. Okay, now she's definitely, is that opium she's smoking?
Yeah, I believe. That's opium pie. So.
There's so many things that in just a couple of years wouldn't have flown.
Look at the faces of those guys. Look at their facial reactions throughout. They're just so hilarious.
Is that Tupac Shakur over there?
What the hell are we making again? Maybe.
We got some
that was a big
venom from a tarantula. What the hell do we get from the python? Some blood?
I think that they didn't.
Hug?
I think most people, they were assuming the audience wouldn't realize that there's no poison in a python. So
or that type of tarantula.
See, if I was this guy, I mean, I would be shitting in my pants right about now. Like, what the hell are these guys doing?
Well, to be fair, I've paid for this sort of thing, so.
Myrna just back there getting high watching all this.
It might be.
See, this is why I wanted to do a commentary for this. Sorry, well, what's that? I'm sorry.
It might be the most standard approach to just sit in the back and get high and watch.
Yeah, pretty much. I'm not afraid of your poisons.
7 Herbs. What is he? Working at KFC?
The sacred 7 Herbs. He looks a little bit like Leonard Nimoy as Mr. Spock almost there. They're actually standing on pedestals.
I'm just so jealous of like the audiences that got to see this sort of thing first run when it was new, because cinema was a wide open space. You didn't know what you were walking into. Now, yeah, the code would change everything for the negative for many years afterwards, which is why, people say, well, why do you like the 30s so much more than the 40s? Well, it's not saying it's not saying you couldn't do some great things in the post-code era, because you could. My favorite film is a post-code film, but my God, things were wild and woolly for those 6 years or so when Hollywood was just cranking out whatever they thought they could get away with, before they offended the local obscenity boards.
Just trying to figure out what the hell's going on.
They're trying to stop Fu Manchu from raping, killing all the white men and raping all their women.
Yeah.
That's basically the story, yeah.
And absconding with all the Genghis Khan treasure.
Mm-hmm.
They're both trying to get the treasure, right? So,
Lauren, can you imagine watching Freaks when it first came out in March of '32?
No way.
In its 90-minute version.
Iteration. Can't imagine.
I can't imagine either. I just can't imagine.
I mean, did people go see stuff like that and just have like breakdowns?
Yes.
Well, supposedly there was a woman had a miscarriage. Supposedly a woman had a miscarriage, which I think is not true, but legend has it that a woman had a miscarriage while watching it.
The whole Frankenstein thing, the other thing to keep in mind is there was all these people passing out during Frankenstein, but when you realize that that movie played throughout the summer of '31 in a lot of theaters without air conditioning. Yeah, so there you go.
Yeah.
Do you think people were still bitching in 1932? Were bitching about the concession prices or what?
Let's all go to the lobby.
Well, the biggest hit of, well, I don't know about, I can't think of 32, but the biggest hit of 33 was King Kong. I mean, that struck a chord with Depression era audiences, for sure.
And that makes Fay Wray into one of the biggest draws in Hollywood for the next 5 years. That and Most Dangerous Game are a 1-2 punch that is hard to imagine today.
Mm-hmm. Well, 3 punch if you include Mystery, but
yeah, of course. For my money, it really should have started a few years earlier with The Sea God, which she's just amazing. And I mean, she's not a very good actress yet in it, but that's not the reason to watch her in that movie. That's a 1929 film that was released in 1930 in most territories. So you get contrary dates depending on what you read. It's not a horror film. It is an adventure film, but it eventually has, jungle savages and a bunch of tropes that you'll recognize from the horror genre in it. But it's pretty light and silly, but she's absolutely gorgeous in it. You can find it on YouTube if you really want to look at a shitty rip of an old VHS copy of a 16mm reduction. That mohawk rules.
It reminds me of the giant ball in Wizard of Oz that the Wicked Witch has. Might have been the same one. It is MGM. I tell you what, while this scene is playing out, I'm going to read this passage from this book, The Only Good Girl in Hollywood, about Loy. MGM seems to have started this production without a clear sense of where it wanted the film to go. According to Karloff, in the original script, which was incomplete on the first day of shooting, his character sometimes spoke flawless English and sometimes pidgin. 3 days into production, the original director, Charles Beater, was replaced by Charles Braben, and the screenwriter yielded to a team of writers that at one time included 5 names and eventually reduced itself to just 3. Boris Karloff decided that the only way to approach his maniacal role would be to kid it, and Myrna followed his lead. MGM went all out on lurid effects, introducing a pit of snapping crocodiles, a bell torture, electric shocks, and walls of metal spikes to the indignities his enemies faced at Fu Manchu's headquarters. A reporter for the Los Angeles Record noted that the, quote, picture is as packed with underground passages, electrical death machines, snakes, tarantulas, hypnotizing serums, daggers in the back, trapdoors, screams, smoking fluids, mummies coming to life, and all the other gas accessories that the audience was unable to do anything but laugh. So it seems like the movie did entertain people back in the 30s, for better or worse.
Did anyone ever say why the director was replaced?
It didn't specifically say in that book, unfortunately, and Myrna Loy doesn't say in the autobiography either. I don't know. I would have to see. Look at the expressions on those guys' faces. They're like, "What are we doing?"
And now she's wearing the hat.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
I think next episode of Region Free, we all need to wear those hats.
Do you think MGM would give a damn about this movie if they still own the rights to it?
Well,
I mean, in
the
terms
rights
of
are
physical media.
The rights are with Turner. That's why it ended up over on the archive collection.
Right. But what I mean is, like, if MGM actually still owned this movie, do you think they would have put out a Blu-ray by now?
No. I don't think anyone's putting out anything from this far back in the vault at this point.
Yeah, exactly. I think we lucked out with Mystery of the Wax Museum. That was a miracle, but...
That's kind of why, starting about a year ago, I'm sure Jay remembers me prattling on about it, but I just made the decision to go out there and fill in the gaps from this decade in my collection, because I do think the time is running out, and I don't want to get flat-footed on this. I think it's important to have as much of this as I can.
Less than 10 minutes left. Yeah, this is the Crocodile Pit, of course. Which here again, it feels like it's from a 1960s Batman episode. It just
also sort of reminds me of the end of Amicus's Crypt of Tales from the Crypt. The last episode there, with all the torture devices in the house. That dress may be my favorite thing in the film so far. Okay, that dress definitely is my favorite thing in the film so far. This is why we can't have nice things. I have to ruin things with obviously sexist comments.
Oh, wait till the next scene when he sends that infamous line, which I'm still shocked I heard that the first time I watched this.
So this shot, I don't know if they have her up about on a ladder or if Karloff is kneeling, because there's no way they're nose to nose here.
Oh no! Oh no! Yeah, she's definitely got some help. Further injections of that interesting serum. Oh man, this is straight out of Temple of Doom, actually, if you think about it.
Actually, I think this might be the Libertarians National Convention, if torch-bearing angry natives are any indication. I love alligators. I really do.
Mm-hmm. So are you saying you would want to visit that farm and Live and Let Die where James Bond gets stranded on the little rock and has to walk all over those crocodiles?
I would do it.
What?
I'm not joking.
Men of Asia, our skies are red with the thunderbolts of Genghis Khan. They rain down on the white race and burn them. Damn. Now, this escape, well, it's not an escape so much as just he like walks out, like
he just steps all over him.
Like that's very impressive. I mean, credit the actor for doing that. Oh man,
alligators are really not that aggressive. Stomping on their heads.
Oh, they're not?
Not really.
But they are quick
when they want to be.
It was probably really cold. That's why they were not moving very much.
And they were probably well fed.
Yeah.
Maybe so.
They're not intrinsic. When they attack, it usually has to do with young being around, like most animals.
Oh, this poor girl.
He's got like a fruit basket on his hat.
Yeah, he's like a male Carmen Miranda.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go. You kill them and take his women.
To be fair, I don't really mind his plan.
You know what? I think Bulworth would like that plan too.
You know, men just don't have that drive to take over the world with insanely small plots anymore. We need to work on that. We need some supervillains in the real world. It'd make things seem a lot more sane.
Is that him again? Oh, wait, no.
I was wondering that myself. I was wondering that, actually. Grab that sword.
This guy needs to be a little bit more worried, I think.
Wow. A war eagle scream.
Now it's a party. Hand out the swords.
Is this like an ISIS training video?
No, it's a MAGA training video. Oh no.
Yeah, that might not have been smart. See, I want to be the prop guy who got to make that thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get handed money and be like, I need 7 fish bowls, 2 canisters, a telescope, and a urinal. Go.
And two Gila monsters.
Oh, yeah. I would always want a Gila monster.
And a python.
Yeah.
That's all it took.
Just kind of tapped him with it, yeah.
White man, kill him! Kill him!
Yeah.
That's cool.
Now we're setting some people on fire with electricity.
Yeah. they just said, we got to just end this. Just shoot them all with this electrical ray.
I wonder how they did that effect, though. That looks really cool.
When all else fails, genocide.
Yeah.
It's still going. They just left it. And we're getting the fuck out of Dodge.
Yeah, exactly.
Brooklyn sounds good about now.
And Fu Manchu won't be bothering us again until the next episode.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, he's done for the time being, though. But he'll be back sometime. He may not be played by Karloff, but
would have gotten away with it too if it wasn't for you meddling kids.
There were
really metal show up and they're like wait for clues to drop in their lap. That's not meddling. And this movie has the best hats ever.
Mm-hmm. I agree with that. Kudos to the costume designer.
Not the best.
See, now this is horrible. This stereotype, this is horrid. This is horrid. It's painful to look at. Yeah.
Is he doing like a really bad accent?
I don't have the volume up on my
Gong. Intercept. Oh God.
It's just like the end of Titanic.
Oh yeah. I give you back
a far better movie.
Except they threw Leo overboard instead of a sword.
Mm-hmm. And that is The Mask of Fu Manchu, 1932, from MGM. Yeah, unfortunately, it doesn't end like The Mummy with Universal's a good cast is worth repeating. I've always loved that.
Yeah, no credits at all, huh?
Oh, they're all up front.
Nope.
All in front.
Yeah, they're all in front. Yeah.
And it's actually Italian cinema. That was true until like 85 or something. You got nothing on the tail end. It was all up front. That's why you remember if you watch those films, you'll even see like the copyright notices come up before the film begins. They're like leaving nothing on the table.
So what do you guys think of The Mask of Fu Manchu? Closing thoughts? Summarize your feelings about it.
I liked it quite a bit. It was definitely, I've got to get on watching more of these films from that era. Just because I'm basically totally green. I've seen a handful. So. But they actually made a few sequels to this, right? Or just one, The Mask?
Well, the character existed in literature beforehand, so there's a bunch of different adaptations and stuff.
Okay.
They're not necessarily direct sequels.
Okay.
But yes.
Yeah, so there weren't like sequels to this movie like with The Mummy, like with Mummy's Curse, Mummy's Ghost. Yeah. Like, there wasn't like
yeah, the rights weren't all in one place either, so you'll find... I think there's even a later... Isn't Stone, you'll probably know better than I. Isn't there like one of the last Monogram productions was a Fu Manchu film? I think.
I need to look it up.
Yeah, well, whatever. It's not
I
that
should have researched more Fu Manchu. I should have researched more Fu Manchu before the commentary, admittedly. But I've been working all week. But also I've been focusing more on Myrna Loy than anything else. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I think that that's fine. I don't know how much of the region-free audience is going to jump right on Mask of Fu Manchu tomorrow. So I think we probably have a little bit of leeway. But hopefully we were able to entertain you in some other way. No matter if you search out this film and watch it with us or not. I just want to say, look, everyone knows 30s are my favorite period for a horror film. Favorite period for film, period. I think there was just so much more that went into the films at the time, and they resonate so deeply with me. And yeah, it's a window. By the end of the decade, in 1937, there was not a horror film made in England or in America. There's definitely that period of 1931 to 36, which to me is the best time in the genre's entire history for film. So I never need that much of an excuse or that much of a push to watch anything from this period. I wouldn't say this is a favorite, but I would say that it's a lot of fun and you can't go wrong watching almost anything from the period if you haven't seen it.
I'm going to say that of all the Myrna Loy movies that I've watched in the past few weeks, that this is not my favorite, but it was definitely the most entertaining. It was definitely the most out there. I mean, the thing is that she made so many of those exotic roles that they all kind of blend together. I mean, sure, she did one movie for, she did stuff for a lot of directors as, all different types of, all those different types. But this is probably the most memorable. even if it does have dated aspects, which some may find a little difficult to sit through, but it's a 68-minute relic from the 30s. I think it's worth watching once. I mean, if you dig that period, if you dig these actors, it's definitely worth checking out. But it will never top my list of Karloff or Loy movies. Be perfectly honest, but nor should it. Exactly. It's for it. There's an audience there for it, and
it wasn't so long ago where UHF stations would play this film regularly. So I mean, it is a sign of the time of where we are at right at this moment that I don't think you could broadcast this film right now. So,
do you think they could have played it during the Mystery Science Theater era? And gotten away with it?
Maybe, as long as you're making fun of it and treating it like it has less than, you'd probably be okay. But I just find it depressing that we've fallen to a place where something like this has to even have a disclaimer. I think it's obvious what it is. I think any reasonable person is not going to decide to live their life based on how this film presents people. I think people are smarter than sometimes our loudest voices in our society claim us to be.
Yeah, I definitely agree with all that. So, all right. Well, and anything else, or are we?
Well, I'm pretty sure Jay has the controls, so we have to talk for a little bit while.
Oh yeah. So yes, Jay.
He's about to go, Jay.
Oh.
Okay.
I would just, I guess, also just say that, we live at a time where people are rushing to try and keep up with the latest Netflix show or the latest thing that just hit streaming. And we need to break that at some point and enjoy all the stuff from all the time periods in the past, whether it's 10 years ago, 30 years ago, 80 years ago, because this stuff does really stand a good chance of being lost to time and us being the last generation who cares at all about it. So do your part. Keep this stuff alive. Keep renting it, viewing it, buying it, talking about it. It's important.
Yeah.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Agree 200%.
Well, guys, thank you all for watching this. If you're still tuned in, all the patrons, thank you for being a patron. We really appreciate it. And we'll see you next time.
Have a good night, everybody.